Hi there. My name is Renee Hobbs. Welcome to EDC 534. Today's date is Thursday, April 4th, 2018. I'm here with the amazing students who are enrolled in the University of Rhode Island Graduate Certificate in Digital Literacy. You know, just a few hours ago, I was reviewing the amazing work that students have done, the coursework that students have done in developing their expertise in digital literacy, and it's been amazing to see. And so part of what you, I'm sure, are realizing now in the second semester of this program and steaming to the finish line, right, is that, you know, by doing things, you gain expertise, right? Through reading, through commenting, through sharing, through creating, you're developing your expertise and your leadership skills. And so I had the opportunity to look at what people were doing 2 years ago in this program, and now to see where they're at and where their careers have taken them. And so I just have very good expectations that the same kind of great things are going to happen as you bring your leadership skills and digital literacy to the world. But never mind all that. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight. Of course, really today is a big opportunity to do some reflection, as our focus question for tonight's class is, how can create to learn pedagogies be applied to the context of your work and life? So here's kind of the architecture of what I'd like to do in just the 1 hour that we have together. I want to do a round of highlights and lowlights. I want to talk about that question, how can digital storytelling be adapted to the context of your work and life? I want to explore a pair share activity where we think about the relationship between self-expression and communication, because your work falls in relation to those two concepts for Leap 3. I want to think about digital storytelling in the context of the Common Core. And then I want to see if we can generate what research questions emerge from your experience with Leap 3, because it's possible that the experience of composing your digital story actually raised questions that could be studied productively as a form of research. And then, of course, we'll take some time to talk about what's happening next for next week's topic. So let's go around the room and start with highlights and lowlights, right? You created digital stories and you uploaded them and shared them with the world. What were the highlights and what were the lowlights of this activity for you? It's a very personal reflection, highlights and lowlights. What did you love about it, and what was deeply troubling, difficult, and annoying? Who wants to go first? Barbara.
Well, if you listen to my story, it was about making this cake. And the highlight was that I made the cake. And it's always fun to make that cake. And I really liked telling the story. It's a story I've told before in other settings. And the low light was I ate that whole cake myself. Yeah, that's really the low light. This is why I need to get to the gym. So I'm sorry, that just a low light. You make a cake, you eat it.
You make that bed, you lay in it, you bake that cake, you eat it.
Yeah.
All right, there's the highlight and lowlight getting us started. Who's next? What were the highlights and lowlights of you engaging in the process of digital storytelling?
I can share.
Thanks.
The highlight for me was kind of like reconnecting to this old story and rehashing it. And it was about travel. So I'm in a place right now where I'm not doing as much traveling as I used to. So it's nice to kind of relive memories. And A low light was I was coming up against a lot of barriers trying to use uh, free apps and free programs online. I'm using WordPress for my blog, and you can't upload audio files with the free version of WordPress. So I had to kind of like skirt around it a little bit because I just was like, no, I'm not paying $4 for my WordPress monthly subscription. I don't know what, it's something personal about me. I don't know what that is, that I'm like, no, I insist on using free apps on the internet. I'm not really sure where that comes from, but anyway, I did figure it out, but there was some frustration there.
Got it. Because you had to kind of try this and it failed and try something else, and then you found a workaround.
Yep.
Yeah, that can be annoying, especially when the project's done and you just want it to be up there.
Yeah.
You know, so if at the distribution end you found the challenge, I can relate. That's annoying. And I'm also appreciative of your point about the opportunity to reflect on your memories and to re-experience something that happened a long time ago. That's always a highlight. Who's next? Highlight and low light. Mary.
So, can you hear me? Okay. The challenge I had was in deciding. And I wrote probably 5 complete different pieces for this. And finally, I read them out loud to my family and asked which one, they preferred. But I think that the issue for me was I was thinking a lot about the readings from last week and what was I conveying and what message was embedded in the story, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was where I was having some struggles deciding which message did I want to share. And so that was a challenge for me. The highlight was finishing. Yeah. So once I finally decided which one to do, it was great.
Mm-hmm. What a great way to describe the highlights and lowlights. That's so beautiful. Thank you. Who's next? Highlights and lowlights. Adam.
I really found that I enjoyed putting together the project I did. So it kind of all centered on this camp in Maine that my parents bought when they were in their 20s, that they were teachers as well. So we always used to go up in the summer. And it's always been a place that like family would filter throughout the summer for a week at a time. So I had got the idea that I wanted to somehow like use other people's memories of the place and like put them together in some way. And I found it to be a lot more special than I thought it'd be. Like I thought it was just going to be, I was going to show up that we were having an Easter kind of brunch with all my family. My mom's family is very big. And I just brought my recording mic and my MacBook, and I was like, oh, I'll just ask, my mene and some of my uncles and cousins about it. And it turned out like as the first couple of times were just like, a couple of things people are saying about Maine, but then slowly everyone else like, oh, come over here. You gotta, let's get cousin David to record this. You remember that story? And then like it kind of snowballed into all these like much more elaborate stories, which I didn't expect, and people wanting to add things. And so it kind of became like a really special moment. And then putting it together later, I was very influenced by like Love and Radio and like the idea of revealing a story, but be as like an absent narrator, like no guiding interview, not being absent from the story itself. So I liked how like the story kind of put itself together in the way you could weave parts of what people were saying, cut up conversations to like build suspense. And I had fun doing that. So I guess a low point, there wasn't really too much of a low point for me.
So what's interesting about your story is that I can imagine now, years and years from now, Adam, people will be going, you remember that Easter? Right? When Adam brought his recording equipment. So in a way, you've created a new story that people will enjoy reflecting on as the event itself. Are you intending to share the finished product with your family members? Why or why not?
No, I did. Like my cousins and stuff, and they're all on Facebook, and they said, "Oh, are you gonna post this anywhere?" I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna put it up on my blog," and I just said I'll just share it because I have a SoundCloud too, so I'd put it on SoundCloud and then shared that, and so they, they've heard it, and I just
So no real lowlights for you.
no, I guess thinking of the actual idea, but I enjoy creative projects like that and thinking about what I want to do with it. So I liked the whole process. I enjoyed it.
Cool. Okay, let's go around the room. Highlights and lowlights. This project, some things you loved about it, some things really drove you crazy. What? Tell us a story. Pat.
I said before, I'll say it again. For whatever reason, video or voice is really an anxious thing for me. So that was probably the low light. A highlight was revisiting the story. And I happened to I was at the beach last week, which is where my story takes place. So I almost added some more pictures in, but then I was glad I wasn't, because the time frame, I don't know if it was a low light, but it was a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Getting it to fit. I had to cut stuff out. I bet you did too, Adam.
Oh, it's so hard. Yeah, you feel so constrained by the length. Thanks for sharing that. I think a lot of us feel that way. Who's next? Highlights and lowlights. Denise.
Okay. I guess my highlight would be finishing the project. And one of my lowlights is, like, I don't like to hear my voice either, and every time I make a mistake, I have to re-record the whole thing. So that would be one of my lowlights, because I kept stopping and re-recording all of my things until I got it to the way that I was happy with it. So, but I think my story is about a kid who was bullying me when I was younger. I was in high school. So I can see myself using my project to help students see the bullying, and we've been talking a lot about kindness and how can we change that situation around for the good.
Mm-hmm. So a highlight of your project is you can immediately make the connection between your story and what your students are experiencing. That's cool. Who haven't I heard from yet? Highlights and lowlights. Jamie.
So for me, it was a highlight to be forced into a position to try out a few new tools that I hadn't used before that I can then use in my practice. So I thought that was good, because sometimes I download these apps and just never get around to checking them out. So it was good to kind of have that reason to interact with them. For me, a low thing was, like other people have said, I don't like my own voice recorded. So that's always hard for me. And I think I mentioned last time, I went through 3 different stories before I zeroed on one that I wanted to share. So it was a lot of writing.
Right. So deciding which one to choose was a big challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Barbara.
Yeah, I think for me, like I said, the story was familiar, but writing it in such a way as to record it with images took many iterations so that it really flowed. It took I probably 4 or 5 or more edits,
right,
to get it tweaked, and that surprised me.
Right. So you were spending time in getting the relationship between the words and the pictures and editing it so that it flowed. And you were spending a lot of time in that process. That can be a highlight or a low light, right? But you're spending that time, that's time, right?
It was a challenge, but it was fun. But
yeah.
It surprised me how long it took.
Yeah, that's good. Who haven't I heard from?
Sherry.
Oh, Sherry, there you are. See, because I can't see you, sometimes I miss you. So what were your highlights and lowlights of Leap 3?
One of the hard things was deciding what to even do it on. I went through all kinds of thinking about what to do. I decided that I was going to go around taking some pictures for it, and I was also going to dig through pictures. which I had a blast doing. That was going around taking pictures, and then you know how you get lost in pictures? Like you pull out the old pictures and then you get lost in it and you're like, oh yeah, I have a purpose here. I have to stop looking at pictures.
Yeah,
And then
later you're like, oh, what was I doing?
and then I put so many pictures, and then it was finding the one that really matched with what I wanted to be saying was a challenge, but I enjoyed it because I loved looking at all the old pictures. The low light is that it was incredibly frustrating how many times I had to record, because like everyone else, I don't like my own voice, and I kept making mistakes, and I must have done it, I don't even know how many times, and I still cannot get it to publish. I've used Movie Maker, and I cannot get it to publish. I tried YouTube, I tried Vimeo, I tried Twitter, I tried Facebook. Vimeo almost does it, and then in the last 2% it says error. I'm like, no. So I don't know what's going wrong with it. And then I ran into the same thing with Angie. I tried to put it onto my blog, and it wants money for me to put it on my blog, and I have not figured out the way around yet, Angie. I've got to figure that out. So I ended up actually emailing it to you.
Cool.
Just because I can't figure it out, but I'm going to keep trying to figure out how to get the thing to publish.
I'm glad. I was just going to say that's always a worst case scenario is email it to me, and I may try to see if I can upload it, because you're right. It might be something with the way the file is, or the weight, or who knows. Between the two of us, we'll get it published one way or the other. All right. So I'm fascinated at these patterns, because do you notice the themes, right? It's about self-representation and your sensitivity to your own presentation of self, right? That's a huge issue that comes up repeatedly. And then about the pleasure, it's the stuff you shared was important stuff, right? So it was worth the time you put into it, because this has intrinsic value to you. It matters to you. A lot of what I've been observing with my own teaching over 30 years is that when my students don't care about what they're creating, I get crap, and they don't learn very much, right? When I make them jump through hoops that they don't perceive as personally meaningful, the learning is compromised. So I'm fascinated about the sweet spot of like something that's personally meaningful to the student and that accomplishes the curricular objectives, right? That's the sweet spot. So that's kind of what I'm hoping that we talk about second. And to do that, let's break into two groups. Oops, sorry, hold on. Let me just share my screen with you here. We're going to just break into two groups for this question right here. It's the question of the night. How can digital storytelling be adapted to the context of your work and life? I'm going to break you up into two groups. You're just going to talk over some of those ideas. I'm only going to give you 5 minutes to do that, and then we're going to come back as a large group. Give me a thumbs up if you understand what's happening next. Okay, here we go. Let the groups begin. Okay, you should be getting a notice right about now. So we'll see you back in the big room in about 5 minutes.
They came back with me. No.
There they
That's
come.
not my group.
There they coming.
That's not my group still. My whole group's still missing except for me.
There we are. We're coming back. We're coming back. We're coming back. Now, I would guess, I may be crazy, but this is I'm a researcher. I would guess that of all the people I've taught to do digital storytelling, and that's a lot of people in my career, fewer than 50% of the teachers who I've introduced digital storytelling have ever used it with their own students. Fewer than 50% of the students who I've taught to make digital stories have used it with their students. Why do you think that is?
Time.
Say more about that.
There's never enough time. You've got all this stuff that you're required to do, and it's finding the time. You need to somehow be very creative that it becomes part of what you have to do anyway. Frustration with the technology working and having access to the technology that you need.
Yeah, two good reasons, Sherry. Jamie, then Angie.
So I think I missed the question, but I'm inferring that it's why teachers don't use this more often. Is that right? So one of the things I think is it's messy, and a lot of teachers don't feel comfortable with messy progression through learning.
Great point. Angie.
This goes back also to a common frustration for teachers of ELs, but oracy isn't often assessed. So anytime that we're asking students to speak, unfortunately, it's not helping us with report cards or standardized testing, speaking and listening. So those skills get pushed aside, and storytelling fits in with the skills of listening and speaking.
Great point. And so, but we devalue it. Barbara.
In our group, we talked about the fact that depending on the age group, students are reluctant to do this. They are self-conscious about their, like we are, a voice or their appearance. And so they're reluctant to do it. And we talked a little bit about how you might overcome that reluctance and what age it might be easier to do it with than others. But I think that's part of the reason it isn't done.
Great point. Have we got out all the reasons, or are there any others? Denise.
I think part of the other thing too is kids are afraid to be judged based on their story. So they're reluctant to share because they're afraid of what other people are going to say and do because of their story.
Right. Okay, so now let's do a crazy thing. And this is almost impossible. It almost can't be done in the time I'm going to let you do it, but let's just try. Because skimming, as Julie Quiro has told me many times, skimming and browsing is a very important reading skill. So what we're going to do is we're going to see if we're going to click on that link that says Common Core State Standards. And then I just want you to skim to find someplace, maybe you can even use the keyword search if you want. We're going to try to see if we can figure out, do we have permission to do digital storytelling in the context of Common Core? What Common Core items might connect to digital storytelling? So if you can right now click on the link, the file is going to open. It's possibly a document you've seen before. This is the Common Core State Standards for English, History, Technology. And then it just goes on and on and on and on and on. It goes grade by grade, K, 1, 2, 3. Take, again, 5 minutes and do a quick skim. And then we're going to come back and see, what did you find, right? See if you can find 1 or 2 places in this document that provides evidence, justification, or some connection between the Common Core State Standards and the practice that you just lived through, digital storytelling. Give me a thumbs up if you know what we're going to be doing. It's a quick 5-minute browse activity. It should be fun. And then we'll take a few minutes just to reflect on what we found. So I'm going to mute my microphone so you won't hear me breathing while I read. Okay, just take one more minute. A second. Okay, so even if you're not completely done, you got a chance to do a little skimming, a little browsing. I'll just hear from 3 people about what did you find. You might want to share your screen with me. What did you find? Mary, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, I actually am looking at it on a different screen, so I
Oh, it's
can't
okay.
share it.
But you can tell
I'm
us.
on page 43 and page 46 of the document. I found for middle school grades and high school grades, there was a standard about writing narratives that also included distribution and production of writing. And also technology was mentioned. So to me, that sounds pretty comprehensive.
It mentioned technology. It mentioned narrative.
Yes,
And
real or imagined. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay, that's cool. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
What else did you find? Adam.
I found quite a few. I only looked at the 4th grade because that's where I teach. But I found there's students have to be able to write a narrative, whether imagined or real. There's under speaking and listening. There is there's a lot that are open to interpretation. I find that with the Common Core standards, it's almost better to be creative in your application of them. Make the lesson you want to make, and then dig in and see what standards can apply to it and tweak it that way. Because I think that a lot of them, that was said, are they're open to interpretation and they're able to be applied. So a lot of times I'll approach it as making the lesson I want to make, and then say, okay, now what are my kids going to learn from this?
Right. Which skills or competencies are going to get activated? Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing. One more. Jamie.
So under presentation of knowledge and ideas, there's tell a story and create audio recordings I found for.
Nice. Who knew? I didn't search on audio, but glad to hear that audio is specifically called out. Okay, one more little activity just because what the heck. And this really is crazy, and I'm not even sure if this makes sense to you, but starting to look at your stories, I started thinking about the relationship between self-expression and communication. So maybe we can just have a large group conversation about this rather than a pair share. When you hear the word self-expression, what does that mean to you? And how is self-expression different from communication? So one could say that with Leap 3, digital storytelling, you had to demonstrate the capacity for self-expression and communication. And those concepts are overlapping, but they're not exactly the same. How do you see the difference between self-expression and communication?
This is something that I have struggled with before because I'm a performance artist, and a lot of performance work is is self-expressive and inaccessible at the same time. So I feel like the difference there is that people are making work to express themselves and not inviting anyone in to understand it. So in contrast, making work that is for the purpose of communication has to be accessible.
You've gotten us off to a good start. Who wants to say more about this? Why does this distinction matter? Does this distinction matter?
I think that self-expression, I find, and this kind of is going along with what Angie said, deals with the mode of expression itself. So if it's a way of self-expressing, it's in the form the art takes. So the style of the story, the style of the play, is it typical of an artist, or is it typical of a person, or is that something this person was creatively trying to do? And communication is more just your main purpose is getting something informational or something that you want understood out without so much, with more emphasis on what's being receptively received, if that makes sense, as opposed to what's actually being shown.
Aha! So you're saying something, self-expression is something about form, or has a preoccupation and an attentiveness to form, and communication has an attentiveness to like meaning.
Yes.
Right? Coming across, you said, or getting transmitted. Other ways you understand this concept, Barbara?
I tend to see where that Venn diagram overlaps.
Yeah.
Because I think it's very hard to separate yourself from your message. Depending on the message, yeah, if you're just telling somebody what time it is or something, but your personality and how you deliver the message, it's part of you. And I think it's very hard to separate those two. People can tell where you are by how you share and what you share.
Really an important concept. They have to be linked in some way, right? All right. Who else wants to say something? Why do I think this topic is so important? I guess I'm very, very interested in something that I see omitted from the Common Core, which is how you get the courage, the tenacity, and the self-confidence to have something to say, to be confident enough to express yourself, right? It's sort of like the Common Core kind of assumes that that's going to happen, but that's kind of the hardest part, right? Right? And so the social and emotional dimensions of expressing your feelings, expressing your needs, expressing your wants, expressing your desires, believing that your feelings matter, right? Those things have to happen in order for effective communication to take place, right? And how many times have we been in experiences with people who for some reason don't feel confident to self-express, or are afraid, or aren't comfortable and are withholding, or who have anxiety about it. And I feel like in some ways it is really empowering when those can connect, right? When you can get your feelings out, get your knowledge out, and take what's inside you and make it be visible. And when you have the capacity to have those ideas be understood, right? Because you've crafted them so that someone can hear them and respond. It's so complicated. And I think in some ways it's another reason why I think there's so many interesting connections between the fields of education and communication that we still haven't thought deeply enough, and that the perspective of the artist, like Angie said when we kicked it off, the perspective of the artist can be very insightful for thinking about how we support students' whole growth as human beings, you know, not just their cognitive skills, but their emotional and their moral and their the whole human being. So anyway, enough said. I get off my soapbox enough to talk to you about next week, because next week is going to blow your mind. Just saying, if your mind hasn't been blown by this course yet, next week is going to do it. Okay? Why? Look what we're working on. Okay, so the theme for next week, hopefully you'll get to complete all these activities by April 11th. This is a little bit of change from the syllabus, like I talked about before. Our theme for next week is transformativeness. How do digital authors build upon and advance knowledge by using the creative works of others? Okay, so first, do some reflection on your Leap 3 experience. Take time to reflect on what you learned as you composed Leap 3. You can select any medium or format to express your reflection. Perhaps you'll write me an email, compose a written work, or share a voice memo, or anything else. Your format is free. Even an interpretive dance, right, could work, right? Your format is wide open. Do whatever you want, but share it to me by April 11th, and you're really reflecting on what you learned as you completed Leap 3, okay? Now, second thing, review the final project intermediate deadlines, okay? I want you, or I encourage you, a lot of students seem to benefit from this. Maybe this won't matter to you, but I did decide to place some examples from the work of other students to give you some sense of like, what do we have to do? So down at the bottom of the assignments page, I've added some cool examples. For instance, Jillian Belanger, a student from a few years ago, for her digital authorship project, she did a critical analysis of the TV show Drunk History. And for her final project, she wrote an op-ed, right, designed to be submitted to the New York Times on the topic of drunk history. Stephanie Vians, she created her Pachakacha, her 5-minute screencast summary on a topic called digital literacy in action. And for her final paper, she did some data analysis of some of the participants of the Summer Institute. Kristen Beatty, she's a high school English teacher. She did her Pachakacha on the future of media literacy in high school, and she wrote her paper because she wants to be a PhD when she grows up. She wrote an academic paper on the future of media literacy in US classrooms. And then, and then Dan Riley, he's a middle school teacher. He did his Pachakacha on civic engagement and creation, and he wrote a curriculum for use with his middle school students on civic engagement and creation. So here you will get to see some examples of your final project, because this is the actual sequence of work over the next month. Next week, I'm going to expect you to create a creative brief, which right around page, 24, it's a short piece of writing that gives me a sense of your focus. Email that to me as a Google Doc link. The following week, I'm going to ask you to submit a scope of work plan, which also is outlined in chapter 4 of the book. You're going to email that to me as a Google Doc. April 25th, you're going to chat with somebody in the room about your project. The week after that, you're going to submit that 5-minute Pachakacha. That's 20 slides, 20 seconds a slide in a screencast overview, a persuasive overview. And then the following week after that, your final work is due. Okay. You might have questions about this. Now's a good time to ping me by Twitter, or to stay after class and ask me questions, or to email me. But here's what's going to blow your mind this week, your homework assignment. After reading and viewing the materials below, I want you to compose a blog entry offering a synthesis of key ideas under 500 words. That's 2 double-spaced pages. Consider answering one or more of these questions. What were the most interesting new ideas that you encountered? What questions did these readings raise for you? How are these ideas relevant to your work and life? And then, of course, tweet a link from your blog page using the EDC 534. Here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to read Copyright Clarity, How Fair Use Supports Digital Learning. Hopefully you have the book in hand. If you do not, you may choose to read the Code of Best Practices in Fair Use for Media Literacy Education. That's a digital download. So either read the book, which is readable in one sitting, it's so easy to read, or read the Code of Best Practices. Read Pat Ofterheide's chapter called Creativity, Copyright, and Authorship in an edited book called Media Authorship. And then watch Kirby Ferguson's Everything is a Remix, The Force Awakens. All right? We're going to talk about copyright, fair use, plagiarism. We're going to talk about using other people's creative work in your own creative work. Now, let's see what questions you have. Yeah, Pat's like,
My questions will come at 5 a.m. and I'll tweet you a text.
So when I suggest the readings are going to blow your mind, I mean probably the readings are going to blow your mind. So as you respond, what made sense to you? What questions do you have? How is this stuff relevant? Why does it matter that we think a lot about how we use other people's creative work, other people's copyrighted content in our own creative work as learners? All right, have fun with it, you guys. Question, Barbara.
I just clarify what a creative brief, what are you talking about?
Oh yeah, good question. So
that's right, it's in the book.
So somewhere in chapter 2, at the very end, I think it's on page 28, it says a creative brief answers these 6 questions.
Fine.
Okay, so just take a look at page 28. It's a very informal, creative brief is the first pass.
Okay.
Getting your project really started. I mean, you guys wrote me an email and everything, but there's no commitment there. We might have changed your topic, for God's sakes. That's cool. But now we're starting to get real about that final project. It's worth 400 points. It's something you should be able to complete in 6 weeks. So you're going to start to get real about what you can actually do in the next month. That's going to be like awesome and meaningful.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Okay, anything else? Okay, so how about, because I'm so tired that I just need to do this, and I'm feeling like by next week, things are going to be growing, right? The tulips are going to be growing. So let's all say goodbye with our tulips coming out of the ground. See, start down here, and then bring the tulips up. The tulips are growing. Yes! Spring is coming. Thanks a lot, you guys. Love you. See you next week.